There's a lot of talk right now about the vaccine and whether or not we should take that vaccine. And there's been some talk of, is the vaccine the mark of the beast? We're gonna jump right into that conversation. I have been bombarded with so many emails and people asking me, should we be taking the vaccine? Is the vaccine the mark of the beast? There's been this whole talk lately about this vaccine is the mark of the beast. I wanted to pause for a moment and just talk about that as a leader here in the Christian world, as a pastor. I want to share with you just my thoughts. And the first thing when I was doing research is like, how did we get to this? How did we get to the spot that the vaccine has been paralleled with an eschatological view of the end times and this thing of the mark of the beast? And there was kind of three major stories that were kind of leaning towards it that I just want to take a second to look at. The first one was Kanye West had a major role in this discussion. Now, I am so excited for Kanye and the fact that he is following Christ and he produced a phenomenal album of worship towards God. I think it's amazing. And one of the things I think is amazing about Kanye finding Jesus is the platform that he has to remind people that Christ is alive and that he cares for us and he loves us. But the truth is Kanye is fresh and new in his walk with God in a lot of ways. And the Bible teaches that we should be careful about people teaching when they're new in their faith because there's so much being bombarded with them that they have to have time to learn how to process it, time to study it, and dig into it. And Kanye wrote in this article and spoke on YouTube about the fact that this virus is dangerous and it has nanobots in it and that it's going to dupe us into the mark of the beast and we will be denied heaven because we took it. Now, I love his passion. I love his love for Jesus. But I don't know if we should be taking our health and our eschatological, theological views from him at this point. The other thing that's created this discussion is the fact that many governments are coming out saying that there's going to need to be a proof of vaccine. That in order for you to travel, they're wanting to have a proof that you've actually received this vaccine. That is spread to governments talking or supposedly talking about being able to go shopping or different things by having proof of the vaccine. Now, this obviously stirs up a lot of fear, right? That stirs up the idea of when you take that and you add onto the app that we have that tracks people's walking and all that stuff, it becomes a security issue. And I am not one for the government having overreach by any means, okay? I don't want them. I personally don't have the app on my phone because I don't like the idea of the government tracking my whereabouts. But let's be honest, when it comes to vaccines, having proof of the vaccine is something we're actually used to. If you live in Canada, or at least in Ontario where I live, your children are supposed to get vaccinated. And if they don't get vaccinated, the school will actually call you and threaten to suspend your children unless you can prove that they were vaccinated or stand and show that you have a reason to abstain for vaccination. So we're used to this idea of proof. I've traveled around the world. I've had the opportunity to preach in so many different countries. And in some of those countries, I've actually had to have proof that I had specific vaccines just to enter into that country. So this is a system that we already have in place to some extent. So it's not like it's new, but it gets scary because of what's being the possibility of what looks like overreach. But there is preachers that we can find on the internet that are saying, this is the mark of the beast, don't take it. But if you do a little bit of a deep dive and you look into the rest of that ministry, there's actually a lot usually with those ministries that I don't align with theologically. A lot of their viewpoints and their mindsets and their position of where they sit in culture and their purpose, I actually don't align with. So why would I align myself all of a sudden with this belief when so much of what they teach is different from where my personal convictions and my understanding and interpretation of the Bible is? So I understand how we got here, but I thought we should take a second and we should actually talk about what is the mark of the beast. Maybe you're watching this and you're like, man, I don't know any of this stuff. And one of the things that you ever want to be careful of is when you talk about something, you don't want to give power to something. So I thought maybe we should take a second and actually talk about what is the mark of the beast. And the mark of the beast is an end time conversation. The Bible teaches that there's going to be these days where it will be the end days, the last days before Christ returns. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that will happen in those days that prepare the way for Christ to set up his kingdom here on earth. And it's a lot of it, there's Old Testament prophecies towards it, there's stuff in the New Testament, Jesus talks about it, but a lot is found by the author John writing the book of Revelation. And so we're going to jump into Revelation 13, 15 to 18, where it actually talks about this beast and the mark of the beast. It says this: the second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hand or their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast and the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man. The number is 666. Now, there's been some funny stuff throughout history. I remember when the World Wide Web, what we're watching this on right now, was considered that there's 3 W's for every euro, www dot. And those W's, if you did certain math, those W's reflected 666. And so if you were on the internet, you were taking the mark of the beast. I've had people send me stuff saying, like, if you take Trump's name and you do this whole addition thing, his name actually equals 666, and therefore he's the Antichrist. I had another person email me and say, if you take Biden's name and do all this math stuff, his name equals 666, and he's the Antichrist. So it's so crazy how we can get lost in all of these ideas of what is the mark of the beast, what is the Antichrist. And here's what I want you to understand. The Antichrist has one purpose. His purpose is to establish his kingdom here on earth in a rebellion against God. He will actually come and mobilize the whole world against the people of God, which in this biblical time is the people of Israel. He will actually mobilize the whole world in an attack against Israel, and he will mobilize the whole world in an attack against God. In order to do this, this Antichrist is going to have to establish 3 main spots of leadership. He will have to be a political leader and own the political ground. So he will be a political leader. This Antichrist will be a political leader that will have what's called a one world government. He will have this leadership of the entire world listening and submitting and pledging allegiance to him. The Bible also teaches that this Antichrist, in order to make this war happen, will also have control of the entire world economy. There's a lot of talk about a one world currency, right? I remember when the UN came out with that idea of merging and creating the euro, right? That was, this is the start of the end times. It's the start of the one world currency because the Antichrist will create a one world currency, and the whole world will be bent towards this one financial structure. The other thing he has to control is politics, finances, and religion. The Antichrist will actually set himself up as a god. He will set himself up as someone to actually be worshiped, is what the Bible teaches. So he actually, at one point, will walk into the temple of God and is sitting on the Temple Mount, and he will actually set up his throne on that Temple Mount and define himself as a god to the world. So when we're talking about the Antichrist, we have to look at the reality that this person is going to unify the world in a political power. He's going to unify the world in a financial power, and he's going to unify the world in a religious power. So it's not a political leader we see today. It's not Trump or Biden, because they're not unifying the world at all. They are creating more division than they are actually any unification at all. But that's what this person is going to be. And the mark of the beast, or the mark is this, that the world or people will pledge allegiance to this leader. They will actually pledge allegiance and get a physical mark on their body saying, I am with so-and-so. I believe in so-and-so. I will be connected and pledge allegiance to this leader. Now, in history, we've actually had leaders rise up and do this. We had Caesar Augustus overseeing the Roman Empire. And in order to try to bring unity to the Roman Empire, he took control of the entire Roman Empire, which was about like most of the world at that point. He took over all of the finances. So he had control of who could buy and who could sell and who could get money. He took over the control of the entire political landscape because he was Caesar. The other thing he did to try to create unity inside his empire and stop the rebellions was he actually set himself up as a god. And one time a year, they actually had to go and burn incense and declare that Caesar is Lord. Now you can imagine for the Jewish people and the early Christ followers, this was a massive problem. And history teaches that underneath his rule and his reign, Jewish people and followers of Christ were crucified, killed, set off to slaughter for game and for whatever. They weren't allowed to buy and sell. They actually, when we're looking at biblical times and biblical picture of the Antichrist, you actually see Caesar in this moment, Caesar Augustus, actually operating in that. More recently in history than the first century, we've had Hitler serve, who in the same way took control of his nation's money, tried to conquer the world and have control politically in the world, who was directly opposed to the Jewish people and tried to eradicate Jewish people and did horrific things to them and tried to eradicate religion. He would be more of an antichrist picture. What I'm trying to get at is this. If we've had those two scenarios take place in history, I have a really hard time believing that somehow the Antichrist and the mark of the beast is going to be snuck into us through a vaccine that's intended to bring healing and hope to the nations. There is evil out there, and the Antichrist is going to be real. And a day will happen where we won't be able to buy and sell if we are followers of Jesus and God. But I don't believe, and the Bible in no way paints the picture that I can be duped into it. The Bible does not paint a picture that in some way a life-saving vaccine is going to secretly hold the power of the 666 and secretly hold the mark of the beast and secretly be injected to thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people. And those people will no longer be able to enter heaven because they unknowingly took this vaccine or this mark, and therefore they are no longer redeemable. Friends, that's not how God works. I promise you, the signs of the times, is what the Bible says, will point to the reality that this is the Antichrist. You will make a personal choice to either accept that allegiance and pledge allegiance to the Antichrist, or make the choice to reject that and knowingly walk in the idea of being killed. The way these first century followers of Christ and Jewish people did, the way the Jewish people did under the reign of Hitler. You will make the choice to say, I reject that person, that religion, that political power, that financial power. I reject that person and I choose Jesus. Not, I took a vaccine and now I'm doomed for hell for eternity. Here's another thing I really want to just pause on. I do see things today that a year ago I thought would be impossible. When it comes to end time conversations, there was times where like, man, I don't see how it's possible for our world to be united and have one financial market. I don't see how it's possible for our world to have one political leader established. And I will say now, coming and being involved in a world pandemic and seeing how the world has responded and seeing all the financial crises this has created, not just in our country, but around the world, I wonder how many more pandemics we can embrace. If this happened again in 5 years or 10 years, then happened again in another 10 years. And what if it happened over the next 100 years, 4 or 5 more times? Could the world really handle that kind of financial impact? And we haven't even begun to look at the disparity between modern civilization or Western civilization and third world countries and look at how bad third world countries have had it and how we really should be stepping in and doing something. So I imagine once those studies and those stats start coming out, there will be a cry to do something. So for the first time in my life, I see how it would be possible in the next 100, 200, 300 years for there to be a need and a desire for a one world economy. I've seen how we've looked for help medically, looking for direction as nations going, what is truth and where is truth and how do we handle this? So I see the ability for a one world leader to rise up and lead in those crises. I'm not saying it's happening today, but for the first time in my life, I say, I see how we could get there. So I believe that the end times are coming. I believe Jesus is returning. But I also believe that my job as a pastor is not to stand and fight against the mark of the beast and protest governments about not doing it. Because if the mark of the beast and the Antichrist is coming, I actually can't stop it. It's part of the system to bring the end times and the return of Jesus. What the Bible teaches, what my role is in that is to tell others about Jesus. To not fixate on the Antichrist or the mark of the beast, but to fixate on Christ and what he did for us when he came at Christmas and then died at Easter, and how he set us free and how there's hope, and how choosing to live for Christ in eternity is so much more valuable than living in the moment and receiving and pledging allegiance to the false God, but that by living for Christ, we will experience eternal life of victory and freedom. That's what I'm called to do. So I do not personally think that the vaccine is a secret undertaking of the mark of the beast that will empower millions of people to be rejected from heaven. I think it's a vaccine that's been empowered to help us walk in safety the way many vaccines in the past have done. But I do believe the end times are real. I do believe that for the first time in my life, I see the possibility of them in the next few generations or years from now. And I do believe that puts an urgency in me to not talk about the end times and the mark of the beast, but to talk about the kingdom of God, Jesus, his death, his resurrection, and his hope for all of humanity. I hope that's helped bring some clarity in this crazy conversation about, is it the mark of the beast and is it safe for us as followers of Christ to take it? Now, I've had an amazing conversation. I've talked about the theology here of the Antichrist and theology of the mark of the beast, but I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you whether you should take the vaccine. That's up to you to decide. But I do want you to be informed. And so I want to do a shout out to the podcast that we have here called On the Couches. It's found on our webpage. It's also found on Apple and Spotify podcasts. And this past week, we had a conversation with a medical doctor about the vaccine. And our hope is that we're giving you informed opportunities to make wise choices. All of it will be in the comments below. I would love for you to check out that video and listen to a medical doctor talk about what is the vaccine, how did it come into production, and is it safe for us to partake in. I hope you have an awesome day. Take care.